Okay, welcome to our presentation. Our presentation is mainly about inequality arising from the quarantine. And now I'll introduce the contents. The first one is about the dimension, and the second one is about the stakeholders, and the third one, we will provide some possible solutions, and at the very end, we will just offer some proposed. Okay, the first one is about the dimension, okay? The quarantine has a very well-known definition, which is government is trying to use this policy to prevent the spread of coronavirus. So people are isolated for several days for the quarantine. Quarantine basically is divided into two sections. So one is hotel quarantine and the second one is home quarantine. And okay, people come to Hong Kong there, of course, for different reasons. For local guys who have traveled abroad earlier, they will simply just wish to go back to Hong Kong. And some foreigners, they wish to go Hong Kong for advanced medical treatment. And at the same time, many people are coming for business issue, and many foreigners are going here for travel. And finally, for students like us, we come here for study. The main problem we are facing is about the high cost of quarantine hotel, and sometimes hotel are fully booked, therefore no like extra spaces for us. And then for the home quarantine part, due to the lack of space, it is quite a tough time for everyone. Okay, then I will introduce the timeline. Okay, so the first number is indicating the time we need, time of days that we need to face the quarantine, and the second number indicates time of days that need to be extra observed. And we can see that the time of quarantine time is gradually decreasing. So at very beginning is 14 days and drop to 7, and finally to 3. And nowadays we do not need to be quarantined anymore. So then I will introduce the price of quarantine hotel. So on the right-hand side is table, which is mainly about the prices. And you can see that the minimum prices is about 450 bucks. So as an estimation, everyone need at least 5,000 HKD for isolation.
Thanks, and I'll now talk about some problems grassroots face about home quarantine. First of all, Hong Kong has really expensive rent, property rent. So many grassroots live in very small homes. They don't have an extra room for them to home quarantine. So if they're not living on their own, they can't come to Hong Kong because they don't have an extra room for home quarantine. Also, a support system is needed for home quarantine. For example, buying them food, buying them necessities. And some people, they just can't live on their own. For example, elderly and chronic illnesses patients. Also, some people are technologically illiterate, meaning that they can't use technology. For example, an app is needed for home quarantine, but if they are illiterate or they don't have a smartphone, they can't home quarantine. Also, many people, if they don't are technologically illiterate, they can't online shop, so they must need a support system for bringing them food and other necessities. This creates many problems. For example, people can come to Hong Kong or go to the mainland for visiting relatives. They may lose their chance to say goodbye to their relatives if they're at the end of their lives. Elderlies may find lonely. Families may become disharmony. Also, kids can't go to school and they can't learn, and they may also lose their social abilities because they can't interact with their classmates. People can't go to work because some work just need to cross the border. For example, cross-border drivers, they may lose their income and also lost their jobs in more serious case. People also go to the mainland for treating their illnesses cheaper, but if they can't come back to Hong Kong, they will not go to mainland, and it will increase their health risk or increase financial burden if they decided to treat their illnesses in Hong Kong. This is merely a problem if it only affect if the rich can also be affected the same way. But then the rich, they have many money, they can solve many problems. For example, they can book more luxurious and less competitive quarantine hotels. Their houses may have bigger rooms, have more rooms for quarantine. They know how to online shop because they have the knowledge. They get access to the information of the quarantine policy easier, so that they are less likely to get confused. Also, special quotas for business travel is implemented at the start of the pandemic, and because Hong Kong, most big companies do business with the mainland, they can get easy application for them to go back to the mainland and coming back to Hong Kong. I'll now pass the time for my groupmate to talk about stakeholders and their views.
So in this part, our group will provide different views of different stakeholders. The first one is the Hong Kong government. So there are 4 aims. The first one is stable the conditions of COVID and take control. Aim for lowering risk of getting infected. And the options is like wearing face masks and also quarantine policy and doing the COVID test and offering some free therapy. And the next one is maintaining the economic growth. Options like the government offer consumer coupon. And also the next one is fix up the clearance problem with mainland. And number 4 is lowering the unemployment rate is a really essential part. the poor's view is very essential in this part. Is like the poor really wants to cancel the quarantine policy. Some people cannot visit their family member and under this kind of quarantine policy condition, and due to the high cost of quarantine. And the second one is cancel of the controls under COVID conditions because they have the limited budget. They do not have enough money to buy the face masks or doing the therapy. And also they hope to get support from the government, both health and economic condition. The next one is firms and industries. For the firms and industry belong to public, their aim is follow the orders by the Hong Kong government, like offering more job opportunities and services for the public. And for the firms and industry belong to private, and their major aim is profit maximization, and they want the stable revenue growth. Some firms and industry are heavily damaged under this kind of condition, like because of the low confidence of consumers in consuming. So the next one is people who care and concerned with COVID. So they really want to support government's control and encourage the quarantine policy, because in their mind they thought that smaller risks of getting infected, and that is the better. Okay, so welcome the next group mate for introducing the proposed plan and solutions.
Next, I'm going to talk about some potential solutions of this problem. Before we talk about some specific solutions, first let's talk about some goals that the solution should aim to achieve. The first is to try to improve the livelihood of people worst affected by the infection control policies. This means that the people who have their jobs lost, families split, school paused, and other situations that have disrupted their normal lives the most, as we have mentioned before. They are obviously more urgent to have their lives restored to normal or improve because they have been hit the hardest. And the second is to protect the lives of Hong Kong citizens. The coronavirus might still be deadly to certain people in Hong Kong, and it is in the best interest of the government to protect the lives of citizens in Hong Kong, of course. Any solution will be trying to find the right balance between these two contrasting goals. Then let's talk about some of the potential solutions that we have come out with. First is that the government would provide some subsidies to the people getting worse affected by the quarantines and border control system. This might seem quite straightforward. Second is that the government creating a dedicated office to help people worse affected by the infection control policies. By that, it could be some preferential treatment given to them, or things like emotional and technical support in trying to get their lives back to normal. Third is to adopt the coexist with virus policy, which the Hong Kong government has done so in September. Assuming there's no fundamental shift that happened during COVID times, this would probably get the people worst affected by the COVID policies back to normal in the quickest way possible. Next, I'm going to let another group mate talk about what our solution to this inequality problem is.
So we can see that the Hong Kong government actually tried to implement some policies as we have proposed in the previous section, but then we can see that the effectiveness of such policies are not actually enough for the people in emergencies to be able to come to Hong Kong and to deal with whatever that they are have to face. So what we propose is that we can try to set up an office especially for assessing and improving cases of emergency. And we can assess this from different time periods of the pandemic. So early in the pandemic, we think that this approach can give people a chance to come for emergencies. For example, for the people with families that are having critical illnesses, they can be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and then they will have a chance of coming to Hong Kong instead of being completely banned. And in the middle part of the pandemic, we think the office can help visitors reserve quarantine hotels, which were especially hard for any people to get. And even more for the people who are in desperate financial needs, the office could set up some temporary subsidies for people that cannot afford to come to Hong Kong, which we think can increase the equality for all the people that are trying to come to Hong Kong. And for the later part in the pandemic, we think the office can still give the needy priority and more help with complying with some other ongoing policies, like there are vaccination pass requirements everywhere, and then the Leave Home Safe app is not really friendly for foreign people to use, and the constantly changing social distancing rules are something that is hard for people to understand and obey as well. So we think the office can provide help to anyone who tries to come to Hong Kong in the later part of the pandemic. So we think that these policies have the efficiency of focusing solely on assessing and approving the cases, which can reduce the complex and multi-party paperwork and administrative process. And the effectiveness is that we can strike a balance between keep maintaining the public health status and also having humanitarian reasons to allow people to come to Hong Kong. And then for equity, we think as we are considering on a case-by-case basis, so everyone could have a chance to come to Hong Kong instead of only allowing business trips at the very early stage of the pandemic. and we can also provide more help and subsidies for people that may not afford to come to Hong Kong, even in the later parts of the pandemic. So this is the end of our presentation, and thank you.